technical advisory committee meeting already, and where we presented these plans and received comments. The technical advisory committee meeting includes one representative from the Traffic and Safety Commission, staff from the Center for the Regional Center for the Blind, members of the Chamber of Commerce, and members of the school district as well, including a teacher. Yes, and members of the Albany Strollers and Rollers. Are you going to say?
Yeah, I was that member, yeah.
Okay. So, so we also presenting these plans to the Park and Recreation Commission for the component of the plaza or park, basically pocket park that we call, and also advice on the median and the some areas that have some kind of vegetation and landscaping. We are also presenting it to the Economic Development Commission and to the Arts Commission in the next couple of months. The schedule that we have envisioned at this point is that we are going to submit the peer review, the peer plans to Caltrans. With Caltrans, we're going to have a meeting, hopefully in December. We don't have a date yet. 65% design back to the commission in January or February 2018, and 95 plans March or April 2018. The construction plans and recommendation to City Council to approve the plans would be discussed at the May-June meeting of 2018. So in terms of funding for the construction phase, we don't have a lot of funding. We only got less than $400,000 to start.
We're essentially funded through the final design, and then that's it.
Yeah, so that's the, our work is to continue looking for funding for construction. So there is going to be an active transportation grant, cycle 4, in early late winter or spring next year. So we're going to apply maybe for some segments of it or components of the grant, or maybe for all. So that's something that we're going to develop at the between 65 and 95%. See what funding strategy we can use. So with that, I'm going to introduce the consultant team. We have Joey Young and Jason White from BKF, and Andrew Lee from the Parisi Transportation Consulting. So they're going to present the project for us.
Hi, I'm Joe Young with BKF Engineers. We are ones who helped lay out the design along the San Pablo Avenue corridor and Buchanan. First, I want to say thank you to the Commission for extending the meeting from last week to hear about this project, and looking forward to getting your recommendations and thoughts on everything that we put together so far.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right, so we'll start with the San Pablo Avenue corridor. So this is kind of an overview of the entire corridor, and what we're proposing to do is shown in blue right now. Each slide will be zoomed in for a better representation of each intersection. So this is right by the car wash, right where the city limits are. So the intent is to put a, that's hard. Do I need to speak to the mic or?
Yeah.
They have to.
There's also a cordless, so there should be one there nearby. You turn that on the bottom. And it's helpful for the recording if you use your mouse to point at the screen.
Oh, okay.
Then they can tell.
Yeah, then it gets stored in the video like that. Great.
Okay. I guess I'll try using the mouse and the point then. I can use the mouse, it's fine. No, it's okay. So right here at the city limits, we're planning to put some kind of a gateway to Albany, as far as putting a median there, and then potentially put a sign that says "Welcome to Albany," and then on either side, on the west and east side, put a bulb out that has a trench drain that runs through that allow water to go through, but also add landscaping to kind of make it an inviting entrance into Albany and kind of set the tone for the city. And this is just kind of the existing condition, and there'll be medians and planters in this area. So the first intersection we'll look at is Brighton and San Pablo Avenue. One of the biggest concerns here is the left turning movement conflicts with pedestrians in this area. There's a lot of traffic of pedestrians due to the Albany High School and Albany Middle School. And so the goal is, for the entire kind of project, is to get pedestrians from one side of San Pablo to the other side safely without any kind of conflicts with cars or bicyclists either. And then also, this is an existing condition over at Clay Street as well. So this is what we're going to propose to do at Brighton Avenue and Clay. So for Brighton, we're intending to do some signal timing changes and add a lead pedestrian phase there. It would add about 5 to 7 seconds to the pedestrian phase to allow them to get into the crosswalk earlier before the vehicles can start, and then make them more visible to the vehicles as they're turning left. At Clay Street, we'll be adding a couple bulb outs on either side on the south, I guess it's north side. And this will help shorten the distance for the crosswalks going across the street, and as also will make them more visible to vehicles, as the bulb out will push the pedestrians out into the, I guess, crosswalk area so that they can see them better. There's a pedestrian refuge for anyone who can't make it across safely, to allow them to stand there and wait without having any kind of conflicts with cars. And also, as Alita had mentioned, we'll also be adding high visibility crosswalks to all intersections, and due to the center of the blind being close proximity to a lot of the San Pablo Avenue corridor, we're actually going to be adding a tactical guide strip in the middle of the crosswalk for anyone who has a cane, and it will be a slightly raised piece that will strike the cane so that they know that they're in the crosswalk and not veering outside of the crosswalk.
What material is that?
It's very like a concrete, I think. It's really thin. It's like a 1/4 inch thick. And they'll swipe their cane and be able to know that they're in the center of the crosswalk and keep them from veering off into any kind of traffic.
The city of San Pablo has implemented those.
Okay. I've seen something similar at the BART station in El Cerrito Plaza. It appears to be a yellow strip.
But it's not yellow. The city of San Pablo, it's another concrete texture.
Okay.
I think you can make it a color if you wanted to.
Just curious.
So the next intersection is Garfield and San Pablo Avenue. Same kind of situation as trying to move pedestrians from one side to the other in a safe manner. So you can see again, we'll be adding bulb outs at this intersection with the pedestrian refuge, and then we'll also be adding yield lines to promote vehicles to stop before the crosswalk, so that pedestrians feel safe as they're going across the street. This is Castro Street, another area that we'll be improving and adding bulb outs at. So this area, due to, as many of you know, San Pablo Avenue, the storm drain infrastructure is limited, and so we've discussed with the city of Albany as far as where to implement storm drain and where not to. This is one area that we've determined that we will not be putting any bulb outs in due to grading conflicts and causing low points in areas that would cause us to need to install storm drain infrastructure, and we would have to run it all the way down to Brighton Avenue. So we've elected to not put any bulb outs in this area, but we will be putting new curb ramps and tactical warning strips and high visibility crosswalks here for pedestrians to get across the street. There was an item mentioned about pushing the crosswalk over to the other side of the street. We've looked into that, but as you can see on the east side of the street, there's actually an existing driveway here that prevents us from putting the crosswalk over on this side of it. So that's why we've kept the crosswalk on the south side of the street as opposed to putting it on the north side. And then as you can see in this location, we've only put the median on the north side and not on the south side due to discussions with the Ford company there. They do a lot of unloading of cars, and they have huge big rigs that come and park, so to prevent any kind of traffic that may back up due to having to unload or load cars because of a median. We've left the two-way left turn lane there so that they can safely park the vehicles there and transport them over to the Ford dealership.
While we're here, so you talked about locating the crosswalk not on the north side because of the driveway.
Correct.
The driveway to the business adjacent to the current crosswalk, there's like a street light there, and how does that all work in? I'm trying to bring it up on Street View myself. Cars that have parked there in the past have had to go in at an angle.
Okay. Yeah, we're putting
not
the
really
curb
responsible
ramp
for that,
kind of
but-
back in the exact same spot as the existing was. We're not
Okay.
shifting it, I guess, in any
And-
one direction.
And the street light remains in the same place?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is Portland Avenue. This is a high volume area due to the Albany Middle School. A lot of students coming down this direction and needing to cross from either side of San Pablo to get to school. So in this area, it's been warranted that we can put a rapid flashing beacon on either side of the street that would be activated by a pedestrian push button. As students cross, they'll push it and the light will flash so that they can get across safely. Again, there'll be advanced yield stripes to promote vehicles to stop before the crosswalk and give a safe distance between pedestrians and the vehicles. And also we'll be adding a pedestrian refuge in this area as well to allow for people who can't make it across a safe place to stay until it's safe again to go across. Also, I'd like to point out that for discussions with the fire department, we've added a cut through here. It'll be a rolled curb scenario where a fire truck could do a complete U-turn on San Pablo Avenue as opposed to going up to Portland or going down to Washington Avenue to U-turn around and get to either side of the street.
For the flashing beacon, where are the activation buttons?
They'll be close to they're not shown, but they'll be close to the curb ramps.
Okay, would there also be another activator at the median at the refuge? Okay.
I'm going to pass this on to Andrew Lee with Parisi's to go over the Washington Avenue options. We have 3 options to show you guys.
All right. Washington's a very interesting case in that it is a gap between 2 planned or existing bicycle facilities. And because there's a stagger in the intersection alignment, that presents a very challenging movement. Right now, if a bicyclist were to try to get from the west side to the east side of Washington Avenue, they have the choice of either riding the sidewalk on San Pablo or trying to get into the center left turn lane across 2 moving lanes of traffic without the benefit of signal control at least one of the intersections. So what I have in front of you is 3 options that we have developed. The first 2, we're just trying to be very creative and throwing all kinds of ideas out there. And then the third one, we actually received some feedback from the Technical Advisory Committee on some other options they'd like to see, and we think that that one is the most promising. So without any further ado. So just to orient you, the left side of the screen is north, the south side is south, the right side is south. Washington Avenue over here, this is the west side, this is the east side. Under this concept, actually let me give some more context. Right here, where we've indicated the mini mart, this is a gas station with a rather large driveway and a auto shop, which has a lot of cars where they park their vehicles, either customer vehicles waiting to be serviced or storage. There are actually not a lot of parking spaces in front of these two businesses because the driveways represent a fair amount of the space out there. So in total, there's about 3, maybe 4 spaces if they really do crowd them. However, we have noticed that the auto shop will sometimes park in their driveways. And so for a practical sense, they may claim that they have more parking out there. On the other side, on the east side of the street, we have several high traffic uses. There's a liquor store out there, which we understand gets a lot of turnover for their curbside parking, several restaurants, both here and here, near the north side. And so we wanted to be really sensitive about the parking uses. So under this particular concept, what we were proposing is to have directional buffered bike lanes, at least in the southbound direction. So coming from Washington Avenue west, the cyclist would make a right turn, get into a buffered bicycle facility, receive a painted treatment and some sort of actuation, ideally with a hybrid beacon of sorts, so that vehicles on San Pablo would be given notice that they should yield to a cyclist, and then the cyclist would take this left turn and go across the street. It would remove all of the parking on the west side of San Pablo for these two businesses. And then coming in the other direction, because we wanted to be sensitive to the parking turnover here, the concept here is that the cyclist heading in the westbound direction would take a right turn and wind up in a buffered bicycle facility like on the other side of the street. But the difference here is that there would be a ramp onto the sidewalk, and that would allow for about 3 parking spaces to remain. This is a typical scenario, but it does exist in Europe where you have a shared bicycle and pedestrian facility. It does present some potential conflict, so we realized that that was a distinct drawback, but it was in sensitivity to the curbside parking here with the restaurants. Continuing on there, the cyclist would be on the sidewalk section, which is relatively wide. I think it's 13 feet wide. And then they would proceed to a new bulb out with a curb ramp and then receive signal protection when going across the street to Washington Avenue West. So this was the first concept. Second concept, again, trying to be creative. This was one where we put the bicycle facility in the center left turn lane, or the median, and took some inspiration from the, I think it's the Pennsylvania Avenue cycle track in Washington, D.C., where they have a center running bicycle facility. The advantages here are that we are not impacting parking, and it allows for a cyclist to cross the street in 2 distinct movements that are relatively short. The disadvantages, however, are that a person on a bike would not receive very much separation from traffic moving on either side of them. What we have here shown in the concept is a 6-inch curb, which is honestly not a lot of protection for cyclists with adjacent traffic. But this was just something that we were trying to consider and seeing what we could do to minimize parking loss. So then the third concept we have here, based on feedback from the Technical Advisory Committee, was that we should look into a 2-way bicycle facility, possibly a raised facility or a cycle track, and try to keep the 2-way facility on just one side of the street. And so looking at the parking demand and the number of businesses affected and the types of businesses affected, what we have here, and I'll also show a cross-section that could explain this a bit better, is a 2-way bicycle facility similar to what you have existing right now next to San Pablo at the Sprouts, which was recently constructed. The difference here is that we would not have a landscaped buffer given the limitations in the space, but instead it would be a painted buffer or a shoulder. It would be at the Caltrans minimum of 3 feet. It's actually would require a design standard, but it is part of their design guidance for a Class 4 facility that the buffer could go down to as little as 3 feet. The bicycle facility would be a raised facility at 3 inches above the existing roadway grade. And then the sidewalk would also be raised another 3 inches beyond the cycle tracks. And so there would not be a level design between sidewalk and bicycle facility, but rather there would be several separations. I'll call your attention to section BB. So this is the existing grade of the sidewalk, and what we would be doing is dropping down about 3 inches to construct a bicycle facility or a cycle track, extending it out from where it currently ends, where the existing curb line ends, out another 4 to 5 feet to give you a total cycle track width of 8 feet, which is the Caltrans minimum for a Class 4 facility, and then ramping back down with a 3-inch curb to meet the existing roadway grade. So this is essentially dropping down the sidewalk just a little bit and pushing it out further into the street in order to provide a two-way bicycle facility on one side of the street. With regard to the driveways, what we're proposing here is, in order to avoid the issues of cross slopes, which would not conform to design guidance because you're supposed to keep it relatively level. You can't have a long, like 8-foot wide ramp to serve as your driveway. What we've provided here is a mountable curb. So it would be 3 inches high, but only 1 foot wide. 3 inches high, 1 foot wide. And that would allow for vehicles, if they are moving in and out of driveways at the gas station or into the businesses, to make a relatively quick ramp up into the bicycle facility and then into the business itself. So I'll just reiterate, this is a two-way facility. We have several locations where there's driveways, and that's where we would be showing the raised, the mountable curb. Otherwise, it's a raised facility that's 3 inches difference from the existing sidewalk.
So if you were riding on the cycle track, you wouldn't feel a difference in grade as you entered and exited the driveways.
That's correct.
You would see a difference left and right of you, but it wouldn't affect
It would
your
be
tire
level
path.
throughout the
Okay.
entire thing
Thanks.
for the bicyclist.
Did you have any signal control in that plan?
So there's existing signal control over at Washington West. And what we have in the plan here is a proposal for a hybrid beacon. So mast arms here, bicycle activation with push buttons, and pedestrians.
All right, so we'll move on to the Buchanan Street improvements. So again, this is an overall look at what we'll be doing for the Buchanan improvements. There'll be improvements down by Adams Street in the City Hall right here, Taylor Street, and then also Pierce Street. So here's an existing look at Buchanan and Taylor. And what we're proposing here is adding a few bulb outs on either side of the street to allow for shorter crossing distances for pedestrians. We'll add the high visibility crosswalks in this area as well as another pedestrian refuge for people to stand if they aren't able to make it across. In this area too, we will also be adding a Hawks signal, which will be activated by a push button as a pedestrian is ready to cross the street, and will allow vehicles to know that they'll need to yield to them and stop. This is the Buchanan and Pierce Street Plaza. So this kind of shows the existing condition and the flow of bicyclists and pedestrians across the street and over the freeway and railroad overpass. And this is just kind of a look of existing condition at a bunch of different angles. And this is the Pierce Street improvements. So we're planning to extend out here and put a median, or not a median, a landscaped area in this area and over here to make it a little bit more inviting and add vegetation and some stones. And then because bicyclists cross this street, we'll be increasing the size of the curb ramp to allow for easier access for bicyclists to get up onto the sidewalk and cross Pierce Street. The Buchanan and Madison Park is next. Again, this is an existing condition of kind of the flow of bicyclists, as you can see in the red dash line, and vehicles from the fire station, which is the yellow arrow. So as you can see here, this is the existing condition, and you can see a number of things as far as lights, joint poles, utilities, fire hydrants that would have to be coordinated with the implementation of the park. And this is a representation to show that there's a lot of water that is coming down Madison and Adams Street and going towards Buchanan Street. And we looked at this as an opportunity to implement a rain garden in the parklet to treat the water, but also provide a aesthetic appeal to people. So this is what we came up with. You can see that there's a number of different pathways through the parklet from multiple directions. The darker green in the middle would represent the rain garden that we'd be implementing in this area. And also this kind of gray line here is a gutter that allows water to flow through. I think WRT even said, putting a boat in it and watch your kid race the boat down the stream. It's kind of a stream look, and then it would also dump into the rain garden if it ever got overflowed. Here's a couple more representations of the park.
I have to add that this is still just a concept. I think the Park and Recreation Commission will have to have more of a say on what is inside this park or a bulb out or a giant pocket park. But this is just a concept right now.
So just a number of different angles to see. You can see here the rain garden is here represented in the dark green, and then the gutter you can see on the right. Questions?
So everybody has a copy of public comment that we received via email from Preston Jordan, representing the Strollers and Rollers.
I think after we hear public comment, I'd like to kind of go through Preston's letter item by item, if you'll give me the leeway to do that. But it's pretty detailed, so I won't consider it as questions for now.
I know that we have that there are a number of bus stops that are old and they're near side and I think in uncontrolled intersections. When the city was going through the complete streets plan, did they consider bus stop relocations as safety improvements?
We have not, but this is an opportunity to address that if we can do that.
Yeah, I think the ones that come to mind are, well, I think there's only one set that we would really have to look at, and that's aside from Solano, San Pablo and Solano. Well, there's also actually some older stops on Buchanan as well.
San Pablo and Solano is not included in the project
Right.
limits. The project limits for this process is the southern leg of Washington.
Washington, okay. So then at Portland and at Castro, there are near side bus stops, and I think those are both uncontrolled intersections. Is that correct? So yeah, it'd be good to see if we can take a look at those. I can make more comments later in the comment period after public comment.
I'm curious about pole sighting and width, especially for hawk signals. The poles we recently implemented at the hawk signal at Dartmouth, or are still being implemented, are upstream from the curb cut and are of significant width. And along with the landscaping, make it pretty hard to see anybody waiting there if you're in a vehicle. I know that we want to have hawk and other signals in advance of the crosswalk. If I'm here, the crosswalk is here, we want to have the hawk, hang out in front, be very visible. But is there a way to move those back or move them to the other side and use other features to make that happen? So I'm asking specifically about Taylor and Portland? Are those or were those the two that had? I'm losing track.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Taylor and then.
Should we look at Taylor quickly? Portland, yeah.
Portland's is just a rapid flashing beacon, I guess.
Portland's just rapid flashing. The same issue might exist there,
Yeah.
especially if there are signs mounted on the pole at person height or near person height.
Okay.
I know they're supposed to be taller, but
Yeah.
so do you have the sighting for the poles here at Taylor?
No.
Okay. And I'll reserve the rest of my comments for later.
There is also, if we go with option 3, there is a pedestrian hybrid beacon at Washington.
Oh, so maybe we should look at that one too?
We're going to take into consideration the comment and the visibility. That's important. So the location of the pole is going to be analyzed. When we
Great. Now I'm just asking questions now because it's not time to comment, but thank you. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions at this point? No. Robert? It's time for public comment, and we have two. Valerie Risk and Brian Martin. We're back up to 3 minutes today, tonight. I think we're fine.
Hello, hi, I'm Valerie Risk, and I live on the 600 block of Adams, which is between Castro and Clay. And I teach physics at Albany High School. And I have 2 kids that go to Albany Middle School and Albany High School. So I have a lot of experience crossing San Pablo at Castro and at Portland. When I was listening to you talk about improvements at Portland and Washington, which are so welcome, it's so wonderful this is on the table now. I remembered a friend of mine when my kids were young and we used to push them in strollers or take them in bike trailers to Memorial Park. A friend of mine came from Berkeley. She biked up the Greenway, then she turned left at what seemed like a major intersection, went down Portland, couldn't cross at San Pablo. She said, "Oh, Portland, I can't believe you can't cross at Portland." So she went back to Washington and crossed with her bike so that she would be safe. And I thought, I know that for some reason, I don't know why, but Washington seems to be the focus for bike lanes, bike crossing, improvements. And I'm wondering, why did my friend assume that Portland was the main crossing? Is it because Portland is the street that goes to Memorial Park, the swimming pool, the high school, the Veterans Hall, the dog park? Okay, what does Washington go to? It's a quiet boulevard with no destinations at all. So if someone is coming from anywhere north and crossing, we live a little bit north of Portland, right? We would cross at Castro or Portland, and every day I see high school kids attempt to cross there It is so dangerous. I see them running for their lives across 5 lanes of traffic with cars that are not stopping. There's nothing to get those cars to stop, and there's no refuge for them. So I think everything you're doing is an improvement, but I would appreciate additional improvements, and I like the strollers and rollers requests to add additional bulb outs at those crossings. And I would like you to consider that Portland is really the major crossing there. Portland is the boulevard that leads to everything from Albany Hill, and it needs a little bit more attention, I think. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Martin. I live in the 600 block of Adams, and I wanted to echo some of those comments. I wanted to also ask for the traffic light that was mentioned, a lead time for that, like at Brighton and other places. If that's free, you may as well do that now. I don't know what's involved with figuring that out. Portland and Castro in particular, I would say, are critical to have bulb outs there. I'm really disappointed that particularly at Castro, it seems like there's basically no change as far as I can tell from the plans. It's the same, we already have a crosswalk there. It's already really dangerous. One of the moms on our block says her daughter was walking with a friend to the high school a few years ago, and the friend got hit by a car and at Castro. And there's always, we see so many near misses. I'm surprised there's not even more kids getting hit all the time. So I think bulb outs, I understand San Pablo has a lot of drainage, a lot of water comes down and is there, and so I heard that from the consultant that the drainage is important, the culvert, and so, but whatever can be done to cover that in some way locally there, I think should be looked into to have bulb outs. If there's a way to get a refuge in there, to work with the Albany Subaru to get a refuge at the Castro crossing, and I believe there's a refuge at Portland, but I don't think there's any bulb outs at Portland. So another possibility would maybe be to move, I highly recommend looking into moving the crossing at Portland from the south side of Portland to the north side, where the Ausen used to be a Sizzler restaurant is, because that would, the kids coming down Washington to go to the high school have the light to cross already, but kids coming down Castro either cross at Castro or they walk to Portland, and if the crosswalk was on the north side of Portland, then that's a straight shot to the high school and all the pool and the park and all those things. Whereas from the south side of Portland, you have to walk further and then trace back, and so I'm worried about pedestrian compliance for some of that. Also for Clay, if it's an issue of money, I think Clay Street, it already has a light, and I feel relatively way more comfortable crossing at Clay than I do at Castro and Pomona. And I see there's already bulb outs planned and a refuge, and I think it's good to have bulb outs and a refuge for every single crossing. But if you have limited funds, I would delay that. That would be my recommendation, and put the money that would have gone into that into whatever can be done to get bulb outs and some kind of median for Castro and Portland. And finally, I wanted to, unrelated to all that, is the Buchanan Street crossing at Taylor. I hadn't seen that before, and I think that's very good. As I drive down Buchanan, I sometimes see moms with their kids just trying to cross to get to the ball field, and I think that'll be a really good thing for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Bring it back for comments.
Well, it seems like we're going to need some time to talk about the Washington options and some time for me to go through Preston's letter. So, and then if people have other, I guess if there are other specific suggestions, I might ask that we do Preston's letter first, because it may cover some of the same ground. And then if there are still, if people want to add additional specifics, do that after. Does that make sense?
That would be okay with me on a intersection by intersection basis.
Yeah, but if people have other more general comments, maybe that should go first.
More general,
It's great to see the plan coming to fruition.
yes.
Yeah.
I guess I can try to make this general. So what I was asking questions about the bus stops, though there's a few things that we want to avoid generally. And so the worst possible condition for a bus stop location is near side uncontrolled, right? So that's by far the most dangerous. And there's unfortunately plenty of incidences that have happened because of that, where you get off the bus, or you're not on the bus, and then you try to cross the street, and that bus is prohibiting your view to get across. And so the bus driver is also in an odd predicament, because he or she is thinking, well, maybe it's safer for me to wait for this pedestrian to cross, right? So at least I know this pedestrian is out of my path. Or the driver goes forward, which is also kind of, it's a tricky situation when there isn't a signal. And so in terms of complete streets projects and looking at pedestrian safety, pedestrian safety goes hand in hand with cycling, and it also goes hand in hand with transit. You have to walk to get to a bus stop. And I think if we have the opportunity here to create safer places for people to cross when they're getting either to or from a bus stop, we should take those into consideration. And then I can talk about specifics as you go through the different corners. And then the other piece is, I know there's some alternate proposals from ASNR about PED bulbs. And I think we also have to look at those in terms of how they're located relative to the bus stop. And so the one thing you want to avoid is having a bus having to come around in front of a PED bulb into a bus stop. And all that creates is you have to create a much longer bus stop so that that bus can get flushed to the curb. So just keep those in mind.
Did you say pet bulb?
PED bulbs. Pedestrian
bulb.
Sorry.
Head bulbs, okay.
Okay, thank you.
And so, pedestrian bulbs. So when you have them at a corner, but you have a bus stop there, usually use the intersection to get into the bus stop, right? That's our way to angle in. But if there's a PED bulb there, it kind of blocks your way. So you have to get around the PED bulb, and you just need more space to get to the stop.
So basically, you're saying that you would like to extend the bulb out to become
That is the best solution, but it's a more expensive solution. But yeah, right. The solution would be extend your pedestrian bulb into what they call a bus bulb, so that now the bus doesn't even have to pull out of traffic. You just stay in the lane, and then you still have the shorter crossing as a result. So that's kind of the win-win situation, but it's more costly.
Do these plans show where the existing bus stops are?
They do not. I didn't see them.
You mentioned Portland and Castro.
Yeah.
Can we put that up? That section up?
That's right.
Can you repeat that?
One of the bowling alley.
No, someone repeat it
One
into
at
the
the
mic. There's one at the pet.
There's one at the pet hospital.
Right. And there's one at the bowl. Oh, that's further back at the bowling alley. But they're near side of Portland and near side of Castro.
And so you're saying that the better design is on the far side.
Correct. So when you have it on the far side, now all of the activity at the intersection is actually behind the bus. So the bus is no longer an impediment to visibility.
But there's still a possible conflict with the pedestrian bulb out.
Yes.
On the far side.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's still going to be a conflict. And so you get around the conflict by one or two things, the bus bulb, or you just make the bus stop longer so you have a chance to get in, but then you have parking impacts.
Yeah, I just wanted to observe that I hadn't really thought about the visibility problem when the bus is stopped on the near side, but it's exactly the same problem that we've been fighting all over town.
That's right.
Where we've been putting in red curbs on the approach to
exactly.
every intersection, because when there's a large vehicle parked there, the pedestrian can't see around it. And a bus is definitely a large vehicle.
That's right.
So,
Fortunately, it's not there all the time, so you get that advantage when it's not there. But when it is there, someone gets off the bus and has to cross. That's the scary part.
It is particularly dangerous when you have 2 lanes on each direction. Because the
Yes.
visibility is completely obstructed. And
Right.
in my days in transit, we saw more than 2 lawsuits of terrible accidents happening to pedestrians.
So this one wasn't possible to move because of the driveway.
Yeah, there's
On
a
the
driveway by the
others?
Auto Plus. And I don't know what the distance is. Do you have an idea of on the southbound side? You have an idea of, I don't know the scale there here, so how long that, from the corner?
The driveway?
Yeah, the driveway by Auto Plus.
No, but wouldn't it come this way? Wouldn't, oh.
I don't know what the distance is.
I think it would be helpful if we could see plans like this that indicate where the bus stops are. Because we should be considering that as we go, intersection by intersection.
makes
Can
it
we
easier.
improve this bus stop? And are we doing anything that's going to interfere with this bus stop? And it'll be easier to do if the plan showed it all.
Agreed.
Driveways for Auto Plus, Auto Body Shop, Albany Body Shop, and at the very beginning of the Ford, but then there's a long line of parking where there could potentially be a bus stop, maybe, but it would take out a bunch of parking spaces right there.
So it's okay for the bus to straddle a driveway, provided that you do have a clear space to put out your wheelchair ramp. But it's not illegal for a bus to stop and straddle the driveway.
Yeah.
I've got a street view picture that shows looking from Castro across, if that would be of interest. So this is looking due east.
Oh, you're plugged in, so.
That's not me.
Uh-uh.
So I was, put yourself on Castro. I'm plugged into the mayor's. Sorry, I thought that was clear.
I knew it.
'Cause I do it
but I don't think he
before.
knew it.
Done it before.
Oh,
Cables are plugged. We can skip it. Right, so I just positioned myself on Castro, looking back across San Pablo.
That's what you did.
And it's pretty clear that if you get a little closer to the northwest corner, yeah. So there really isn't room to put the crosswalk there, is all I'm saying.
to move it.
To move it
To the north
to the
side.
north side.
Um,
Got it.
I do want to question that more, but I'll do that when we go intersection by intersection, if you don't mind. Can we wait till we're going through all of them?
Did you have any other?
No, I think it's good to go through each intersection and we can
Okay.
Okay.
talk about it.
So, and then I think the discussion about the Washington bike treatment should be separate.
Sure.
Maybe. So do we want to cover everything but that first?
Yes.
Okay.
Just
All right.
That's a good plan.
So starting at San Pablo and Brighton, the strollers and rollers request is to move the crosswalk to the north leg because most of the conflicts with moving vehicles have been people from Brighton turning left onto southbound San Pablo, where they've already picked up some speed as they're going through the intersection. And if the crosswalk was on the north side, any conflicts with moving vehicles would be people who are coming from Brighton and turning right onto San Pablo and would not be moving so fast yet.
Was that considered at all?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was considered. You can see though on the north side over on the west side of the street. Here, there's a traffic signal there that would have to be relocated. There's not enough space to put a curb ramp there in the current sidewalk, so you would have to bulb out to put the crosswalk or the curb ramp in there. But there's an existing driveway that is right next to that building that we would have to do some reconfiguration with that. And also, again, with the drainage issue along San Pablo Avenue, there's not a ton of storm drain in the area, so it would create low points at the bulb out, and we'd have to install storm drain infrastructure.
Is there a possibility to add bulb outs in any case, whether it's on the north or south side?
So where we have it shown on our plan is where we feel it works best with the drainage, because at Clay Street there is some storm drain influence, and that's actually where the culvert runs through as well. But past Clay Street going towards Brighton, there isn't any storm drain infrastructure over there. So we would have to run a storm drain line from Brighton all the way down to where the center of the blind is and where the creek is. So we did look at putting bulb outs in this area, but just due to the drainage issue, it was not necessarily feasible in this phase of the project.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that these requests are technically possible, but they're significantly more expensive.
Correct.
Is that okay?
Towards helping us gauge how important or not important that might be, having a pedestrian leadoff seems valuable. Unfortunately, if there are people who, with pent-up desire in their cars to turn left onto San Pablo, that would actually give the pedestrians going west just enough time to get in their way. So it's not a huge solution. What do we know about the danger between two crosswalks in this situation, south versus north, in this kind of T intersection situation? Is there industry data on what's safer and what's recommended?
If you can.
I think you're trying to make the point that with the T intersection, if you have a crosswalk on the north side here, that the right turning movement is shorter and a lot slower.
Slower.
I think that point's been made. I'm trying to gauge the importance.
How important?
Yeah.
It's all about how fast the car is going when they pass through the crosswalk, and chances of them going through at a high speed making a right turn is much less than on the left turn. But the leading pedestrian interval, I think, would go a long way in mitigating some of that aggressive behavior. And if combined with, say, good pedestrian lighting, for instance, hopefully it would discourage that kind of behavior, I think.
Yeah.
And there's no pedestrian refuge there's no place for, not really,
Not in this particular location if we were to maintain the
with the left turn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little frustrating because this is probably one of the most dangerous intersections in the entire town, and we keep hearing about pedestrians hit in this crosswalk. And I think, as maybe Ken pointed out, the leadoff phase helps if you're crossing from west to east. But if you're crossing from east to west, all the leadoff phase does is get you halfway into the street, and then you're exactly
Where?
in that conflict zone when the auto light turns green. So it feels like this plan doesn't do very much to alleviate what I think at least some of us think of as Albany's biggest safety problem.
So if it is,
Could interject, though. The leading pedestrian interval is variable and can be extended, and I think in this particular location, Brighton, it can run at a relatively short signal cycle length. Like along the corridor, the signals are coordinated to run very long, like 90-second cycle lengths. And this particular intersection, Brighton, doesn't need a whole lot, and so we could certainly extend the leading pedestrian interval to be much longer, more so than the typical 4 to 6 seconds, but to something higher, like 10 to 12, where wouldn't be in the exact line of fire if a car is making a left turn, or at least be a lot more visible. That's certainly in our toolkit.
so that's essentially a separate ped phase then, right?
Well, if you do a
Pretty long.
full-blown separate ped phase, for an intersection this wide, I think you're looking at about 25 up to
That
30
long to
seconds.
get across?
It's
Okay.
a pretty wide intersection, so
Yeah.
I don't know if that's fully feasible, but I'm saying that the LPI, if it went up to like 12, 15, it would go a long way versus like 6 to 7.
Is that realistic on a Caltrans controlled intersection?
Yeah, so I think Caltrans will want to request a traffic operations analysis, and they would like to determine the number of seconds in the field once construction is done. So it's going to be open until construction of this project is done.
And they weigh that against any incidents also, right, at that location?
Wouldn't,
Yeah, I think they're concerned, because we meet with different departments. So
Yeah.
really, traffic operations is keep the flow of traffic going, but we have
Right.
also safety, which they have their own criteria.
Yeah, yeah.
What is important with Caltrans, something that I learned through the different processes we're going through here in the city, is that we can push for what we want in the name of the community,
Right.
on behalf of the community,
Okay.
and for the benefit of the community.
So you mentioned lighting. Can you elaborate a little bit on what we might be able to do at this intersection or this crosswalk?
Maybe Joe can help me out in terms of
Whoever.
what we have for overhead lighting right now, and whether,
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, we have some overhead lighting at some of the intersections, but that's definitely something that we're going to look into as far as making each of the intersections more lit to make pedestrians more visible, especially at night.
Do you have follow spots, motion tracking follow spots? So you get the big circle.
Exactly.
I'd love to hear more about the lighting at some point.
When we did the Pierce Street, well, 5 years ago or something, no, more than 5 years ago, the project, there was a side path there, and then we have some pedestrian level lighting that was added to the regular street lighting. So what it is that we have a 30-foot tall pole with a 15-foot lamp that actually provided better lighting for pedestrians on the side path. I was thinking that we can do something like that here too.
Okay.
Because it's very dark at night, and pedestrians wearing dark clothes cannot be immediately spotted if you're driving 3 miles per hour.
Yeah.
this is Pierce Street at Buchanan? Is that what
No,
you're
this
talking
is
about?
this is Pierce Street, the side path we did by the condominiums. So if you want
okay.
to take a look at that,
Okay.
that's something that I
Richmond
would
border.
like to,
Okay.
at least at the crosswalks, not throughout San Pablo Avenue, but at the areas where pedestrians cross.
Right, right. So I wanted to go back to Caltrans. So when you have this, it's at this peer review meeting, and you're saying that you know that with Caltrans you represent the community, do you go with incidents at, say, like this kind of, this intersection? Do you have that? Do you,
Sometimes we can present collisions and
Okay.
injury level,
Okay.
so we can present that information.
okay.
So can I just ask you to say one more time what the technical problems were with the north side crossing, and then I want to ask you if any of us have the stomach to ask to just put in the resources to solve those problems, even if it costs more money.
Yeah. So there's an existing light and traffic signal here that would have to get relocated to install the curb ramp.
Okay.
With the current width of the sidewalk, we wouldn't be able to install a standard curb ramp in that location without bulbing out. And then with bulbing out on either side of the street in these locations would cause drainage problems where storm drain infrastructure would need to be installed to remove the water from these areas due to the large amounts of water that are coming down San Pablo, especially at Brighton. I think most of the side streets drain all the way to San Pablo, so by the time you get down to Brighton, it's a significant amount of water there.
On the east or west side?
On both sides.
Both. But you said that there was a storm drain at Castro.
Yes.
Is that only for Castro and not for San Pablo?
It's undersized, I think, right now.
Fair enough.
But if we may, I think either Jason or Joe or maybe Mark remember that this length and size of the required, if we were to do a proper storm drain, this would become a storm drain project with a little bit of pedestrian improvements. And I'm not remembering exactly the length, but it was substantial.
Yeah, I believe we're in the millions in terms of storm drain infrastructure that would have to be put in because there's a significant amount of water that you have to deal with.
So that was a limitation for the bulb outs and everything.
Okay.
Thank you. That gives us an order of magnitude.
Okay.
San Pablo and Garfield, there were no requests from strollers and rollers. Do any of you have any?
Was this one of?
Oh, I think we also skipped over
Was
San.
this one of the bus?
Don't think it is.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, it was Portland and Castro.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know why bulb outs are possible there?
The question was, why are bulb outs possible there?
We're in this location, we've coordinated with the city. We're actually adding some storm drainage from Garfield down to Clay Street because it's a smaller run of storm drain that we would have to install. I guess we could consider putting bulb outs on the other side as well.
What other side? On the north side?
The north side.
Oh.
I think I skipped over San Pablo and Clay. If anyone has, there were no strollers and rollers comments on that one either.
You know, I'm sorry. Back on the issue at Brighton, could you put a trench drain in on the backside of the bulb, and would that be a more affordable solution?
So we've looked at putting trench drains in, but because of the bulb out in the in the curb ramp would be in the bulb out, a part of the bulb out.
Yeah.
Trying to run a trench drain underneath it, there wouldn't be enough depth, so you would have to run it
okay.
behind the curb ramp and go around it to get it to the other side of it. And
Would you have to go into the sidewalk or something to do that, or can you just? So it sounds like there's not enough space to do everything. So the ramp, the signal, and then a trench drain on the backside.
yeah, so you'd have to route it around kind of behind the curb ramp, so you couldn't do it you couldn't follow the flow line, you would have to kind of divert it around the ramp to get it to the other side of the ramp, just because there wouldn't be enough depth because the curb ramp would be taking up most of the bulb out.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. All right, where were we?
I think I'm ready to move on to Portland unless anyone has further issues?
Castro.
Oh,
So Castro,
Castro, yeah. Okay, so strollers and rollers requested east side. Consultants commented that the driveway is right where the crosswalk would have to land. Is there a possibility of shifting that part of the crosswalk a little bit to the north? So have the west half of the crosswalk be at the intersection on the north side, and the east half of the crosswalk be a few feet to the north with a kind of a Z shape in the median?
The driveway takes up, I think, see from the image.
I'm not sure about your ordinals, so this would be a north side crosswalk.
The goal is to move the crosswalk to the north side.
you're saying,
And the problem is that where it lands on the east, there's a driveway. And I'm wondering if the whole east half of the crosswalk could be shifted far enough north to land to the north of that driveway.
so using the median
Using the median as a,
to
yeah,
see it over.
the median as the cross piece of the Z.
That's creative.
That's something that we could consider and look into.
It makes it a little bit longer walk for people, but I think having a crosswalk with the median is a big advantage, and in this case, that means the north side.
And when, this is, the Castro is another one of the near side uncontrolled. So where's the bus stop on this one? And what would that do?
Yeah,
Okay, that was the one, okay.
Is there enough clearance to move it far side in front of the auto shop where the two vans are in the street view? Yeah, right where your cursor is, right?
Yeah.
See where that van is, right there in the distant corner? Could you fit in a landing area, I think it's like 24 feet, and then have the bus stop on the far side?
That's something we can
You could look at
look
that.
into, yeah. Mhm.
So wait a minute, so let me make sure, so try to move bus stop to north side,
No, it'd be south, west corner.
So the southbound bus stop, right?
found bus stop.
Okay.
okay.
What about bulb outs here? Or is it the same problem with millions of dollars worth of drainage?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So we're asking both things for this. Move the bus stop and explore whatever we call this crosswalk on the north side. Okay.
Brian, when you speak like that, your voice doesn't get into the recording. So,
You could come up to the thing, or we echo you. I'm not that good at echoing, though.
So a couple of questions. One is, can you also go, if it was on the north side where the pet hospital is, cross straight and then do a diagonal to the business to the south?
Like that?
Yeah. Does it? I don't know what a scramble
Well,
is.
that doesn't have a.
There's no signal head.
There's no signal there.
So you lose the benefit of a refuge if you go this way. If you come up here and here, then you can have a refuge. Do a split leg. That's pretty irregular, isn't
Does anybody do that?
it? I'm getting lots of shaking heads there.
Anyway, that's another possibility. The Z could be very good. I would encourage that.
I think the benefit of the Z is that the extra distance that a person has to walk is done in the median.
Yeah,
when
that's-
you're
Safe,
protected.
Yeah, I like
Whereas
that.
with the diagonal's an interesting idea, but then the extra distance that you're walking on the hypotenuse is out in traffic.
It's on the, yeah.
Yeah, and so then my other question was for the bulb outs is there a way to do like a plate? Here, and then just have it be open under the plate, and could enough water go under that?
Like
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, trench drains. Yeah, so it's kind of the same issue. So we would only be bulbing out about 5 feet out into the gutter, because the gutter pan right now is about 7 feet wide. And per Caltrans standard, you need a 2-foot offset from the travel lane for your bulb out. And so what that would do is that would put your curb ramp fully into that bulb out. And so if you were to put a trench drain across, it would run right through your curb ramp. And that's why you would have to direct it around the curb ramp to get to the other side of the curb ramp and to the other side of the gutter. So we have looked into those items. And it's just a challenge because we can't bulb out far enough to get the trench drain to work behind the curb ramp or have enough depth running through the curb ramp.
This may be the same suggestion as Brian's, I'm not sure, but what about a completely soft bulb out that's just done with flexible posts or bots dots or something like that? Just
How effective is that? How effective is that at 30 miles an hour?
I think if it were flexible posts that went up a couple of feet, it might slow people down a bit who don't want to drive over them. But
I guess we could do dialed-in curbs.
say that again.
I mean, we have seen installations that are, honestly, they're more like pilot projects, but not really for something like San Pablo, but we've seen like raised curbs without any alteration to the curb ramp. So you could put an asphalt curb in on either side of the path of travel. They are of limited utility, especially for a high traffic and relatively high speed facility like San Pablo. So I would argue against that kind of option, but they do exist. I do have some thoughts about some of the other proposals that were presented, and I hate to be the person to give contrary reasons, but I'm gonna throw them out there anyway. One about the bus stop relocation, just something to consider here is that with the driveway, it does not present itself as a level landing for the bus to deploy a wheelchair ramp. And so you're looking at extending it over to, I think, past where the tree is right now, where you get your first opportunity for a level landing. So it's just a matter of location and trying to avoid the driveway as much as possible. And then with regard to the Z crossing, we do see those a lot, especially in mid-block locations. I'll just caution here for Castro that if you have a crosswalk that's located away from the intersection, that it may present itself as a surprise for somebody making a left turn and not expecting somebody to be crossing farther from the intersection. And I'll just throw one more out there. I do like the idea of the diagonal crossing, but for somebody making their path of travel from the east side to the west side, they would have their back away from moving traffic. They would not be looking out for oncoming traffic. That does pose a challenge.
And it's longer.
And it's longer, absolutely, it's longer.
But I agree with your bus stop location assessment. You can put that past the tree. So hopefully there's enough landing area there south of the tree to get it in.
Okay, anything more about Castro Street or?
So I have one question or suggestion. Actually,
So I was looking at Street View here, and it looks like the driveway apron for the Galvin appliance is long, and I would say the southern part of it is actually an ADA spot, so we probably don't want people cutting that corner. Would it be possible to shorten the length of the driveway? And I don't know what implications that opens up, but if you do that, is there enough room to fit a sidewalk or a crosswalk on the north side?
Yeah, that's a possibility. You can see here there's a kind of a stripe zone here, so that's where it would be. So we would shorten it between where the triangle and the rectangle is. So.
That might give you a little bit of little bit more room.
I'm sorry, you're saying that the rectangle with the shading could be not a driveway?
Yeah, so the driveway spans from this building corner pretty much to this corner here. And there's parking on this side and diagonal parking on this side.
Okay,
So-
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. So you're saying,
So the triangular piece that's striped could be
Yeah.
raised to curb level and omitted from the driveway?
Yeah, so the area between the triangle and the rectangle would remain as a driveway, and then possibly put a ramp where the rectangle portion is here.
so you can look into that?
That will make it possible to move the crosswalk to the north.
Right.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, great.
I like it.
Assuming that storm drains aren't a huge issue. Sorry.
Consistent theme.
Well, I guess you could do it even without a bulb out.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we move on to Portland? The only request from Strollers and Rollers was once again to add bulb outs if possible. I'm going to guess that you'll tell me that's a drainage problem, but
Correct. As you get further, I guess, kind of preface, as you get further away from Clayton and Brighton, there's not as much water as at Portland or at Castro, but it's just the construction of the entire storm drain line from Portland all the way down to Clay is where it's really expensive, and that's partly why we're not proposing any bulb outs in this area.
okay. And then we did have public.
I'm sorry, what, since San Pablo is a Caltrans, managed site, what do they ever do for storm drains and things? I mean, like, if it gets bad and flooded, do they have any responsibility, or is it just Albany? Do we know?
Well, I think what they would say is that their gutter pan is sized to handle the flow, and we would be putting the obstruction there, so we would have to provide that equivalent amount of capacity some way, and that's where the challenge gets.
Yeah, when you put the bulb outs in, like you were saying, the
It
gutter
makes-
pan shrinks and the spread out into the lane gets more.
Okay.
So we had a public comment request to consider putting the crosswalk on the north side because it's where people want to go. On the other hand, at least in this design, we have a median in the south side, which makes for a significantly safer experience of crossing. So I would just like to hear what the other commissioners have to say about that trade-off.
I think the refuge is important. We have an example of that in Albany now. We have the Dartmouth crossing, and the refuge there has made a huge difference.
Even without,
Even now, without the hawk signal activated, yes, in my opinion.
Maybe more, because it's there, and the hawk isn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, the poles are up, so it's a little distracting, but it functions, and it's an improvement. And it feels like you can deal with traffic from one direction, be in a safe place, and then calmly deal with traffic from another direction. You don't have to keep your head swiveling back and forth to make sure you don't get stuck in the middle. And this would, along with the rapid flashing beacons, would provide that safety. So I'd like to reiterate my comment about, or make an actual comment about pole location and size. And if possible, locate them downstream. Thank you.
Any other comments on that one?
So Washington, we're going to come back to later because it's more complicated.
Portland has a bus stop.
Oh, bus stop.
Oh, it does?
It has a near
Back
side.
back to Portland then.
Northbound.
Yeah, go northbound. There's a near side stop, so you'd move it in front of Alcen. Currently, yeah.
Now
but
it's at the beauty salon.
the proposal would be to move it in front of Alcen. Yeah.
You know, I haven't had it,
Is that right? Just,
Not if the crosswalk is still going to remain on the south side, then no.
okay.
I think, I agree. I think it should stay on the south side. That seems like a safer.
The crosswalk should stay on the south side.
Yeah, because of the refuge. There's not a huge gain you get by moving it. What would be further north by like 30 feet or something? No, one more, like 40 feet.
just by way of an aside, I once came across a lady who was waiting for the bus and had stepped down into the tree well at that location. There are 2 tree wells with very young trees and largish openings. And the dirt is actually down, I don't know, 10 to 12 inches.
And she did that for safety, you think?
No, I think it was a mistake. She was a very slow-moving older person, and she did manage to get herself out, but she was there for a little bit as I was walking past.
Yeah.
Just haven't had another opportunity to mention that, so.
So this design, so part of Complete Streets is the overall design and the idea that it's slow, it sends a message in a more holistic way. And so this is where, because that landscape median is not there, right? I mean, like, so it's a whole
Correct.
feeling that's given by the design over the whole span. That doesn't necessarily speak to the pedestrian crossing at that one part, but I think that median is going to make a huge difference in that area. So,
I have a question. Jeff, can you try and activate the mayor's, because back on the west side at Portland, the curb cut seems to form, should I try a different input or something?
It's not labeled over there. I don't even know if it's.
I've done this before. The curb cut seems to be serving as a driveway. And this is something we saw on the walkabout with Valerie and the staff. But in the street view picture that I have from March of 2017 showing, there's a vehicle that very obviously used the curb cut
yeah.
to get in there.
yeah, right there, yeah, it is right there. And the
Yeah, that one.
vehicle's in there right now, in that view.
Right.
Same thing, same vehicle.
Is this a time to try and sort this situation out? Because I don't want to send everybody to Portland and have them fight vehicles trying to park in front of the tile company.
Can we bollard it or something like that on the backside of the sidewalk?
If we upgrade this curb ramp, it's going to send a clear message that it's not a driveway. I think this is one of the, that curb cut is not a driveway, or maybe, I don't know.
Well, they have a driveway located about 2 car widths to the south. But if there's a car parked in that driveway, oh, there we go.
Yeah, but it has a, yeah.
So there are actually sort of 4 parking spaces worth in front of that frontage and only 1 car width of driveway.
Are they allowed to use that space for parking?
No, I think this is really an enforcement issue in working with the police department and the business owner to make sure that that doesn't happen, maybe some striping.
Okay.
Yeah, does someone put a bollard at the back of the sidewalk?
Could maybe do what we're doing for the Marina Avenue project, some sort of planter or something, raised curb there to prevent them from going over. By the gas station, we put
Yeah, we're
a
putting
raised planter there to
raised
prevent
planter,
them
yeah.
from cutting through that area, so we can see if
do
there's
that.
enough width where we can add a small barrier there that, diverts people from wanting to go up the curb ramp.
Yeah. And,
I'd love to see something appropriate that wouldn't keep him from using the first 2 spaces, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
With that picture, can you describe what it will look like? If there's no bulb out, will there be any change there?
The question is, will there be any change there?
Yeah,
There's no
it'll
bulb
be the
out.
same configuration that we have there now.
where the pedestrian hybrid beacon will be. Is that right? So
Correct,
this
the
intersection-
flashing beacon will be at this
Yeah.
location.
And the center refuge. So
Yes, in
the
the
distance
median.
crossing will be shortened by the refuge.
And, and,
beacon.
and these
And
poles
beacon.
that get in the way will be in that area too, so,
There's a good place for the pole.
yeah.
There you go.
So the beacon here is a flashing beacon, not
Rectangular rapid
flashing
flashing
beacon.
beacon.
Okay. Are we ready to skip over Washington? And let me just ask about Solano. You've said that it's not part of San Pablo, and Solano is not part of the scope of work. There is a request in the strollers and rollers comments to add bulb outs there. Will there be an opportunity to try to do that as part of the Complete Streets project somehow, or?
We're keeping Solano separate, particularly because of our desire to actually improve transit service and move the bus stop
bus
to the
stop.
far side.
Yeah. So is that going to be a separate project that will come
It
before us?
will likely
That
be
will
a separate project.
And
Isn't that part of Salon, no, that's, never mind.
Wrong part.
Yeah,
Okay, so that'll be the opportunity to consider
thank you
the
very much.
strollers and rollers comment in a separate project. Okay, thanks.
Right, we do have, I remember, I don't know if about 4 years ago or 3 years ago, we had an in-city from the UC Berkeley. Some students actually had some conceptual plans for that intersection. That it will become a separate project. We don't want to mix it with this.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it for San Pablo then.
What about
wait.
Buchanan?
Yes, the strollers and rollers has a
yeah.
question about Buchanan and San Pablo. Strollers and rollers request that the plan include the southbound cycling lane on San Pablo from Buchanan to Marin that is proposed in the San Pablo Complete Streets plan. So,
But I think there was no, only one option was shown on that when he wrote that letter. We didn't have the option of the center cycle track, I think.
no, we're talking about San Pablo and Buchanan now. So, like right where we are sitting right at this moment.
Okay,
Strollers and rollers request that these plans include the southbound cycling lane on San Pablo from Buchanan to Marin. So that's been proposed as part of San Pablo Complete Streets. It's not, so again, the question in my mind is, if these plans are limited to Washington and North, is there going to be an opportunity for us to get that cycling lane indicated somewhere as part of a plan that's moving forward?
We have, so essentially removing the parking in front of City Hall, or
I can't remember what was in the original Complete Streets
I
proposal.
don't remember
Yeah.
exactly either, but without either with, it'd either require realignment of the lanes, which I'm kind of trying to remember exactly what the consultant's recommendations were in the Complete Streets, or some combination of realignment of the lanes and removal of street parking. And with this project, the strategy has been to focus on pedestrian crossings, knowing that removal of street parking raises a whole other set of complex issues. Not to say that the request isn't important, but it's just, that wasn't part of our strategy in advancing this element of complete streets forward.
Okay, so I think the answer to strollers and rollers then is, again, improvements at Buchanan would have to come up in a separate discussion as part of a separate sub-project. And a
That's correct.
Similar, okay.
I would prefer to do that, and because that really creates there's a chain reaction if parking is impacted around the Civic Center, there's already an issue, and that's something that is going to require engagement with all the way around the Civic Center facility.
And strollers and rollers also requested bulb outs at Buchanan and San Pablo. Is that also something that would have to be addressed in a separate project, or can that, outside the scope of work tonight? Okay. Okay, then.
Why would that have to be a separate project?
The scope of this project includes the southern, as I said at the beginning, the southern leg of Washington to the northern city limit on San Pablo Avenue. There is one element that we included in terms of the signal at Solano, and if possibly just striping continental crosswalks instead of zebra that we had right now. So the signal is on San Pablo is just removing the split face, and that's an operational change that can be done without any infrastructure. So it's a controller issue.
Okay,
So we kept the downtown
got it.
separate.
Okay. So for example, if I had a suggestion for repositioning one of the units on the signal at Solano and San Pablo, that is out of the scope?
Yes, at this point it will be.
Okay.
We can actually request Caltrans to do it if that's, but not as part of this project.
Maybe one thing we can do, whether at the end of the discussion tonight or at some other point in the process, kind of collect the list of things that aren't in their current assignment, in their current contract.
Yep.
And whether we come back with amending the contract or do a new project for the remaining things that are coming up in this letter, or your suggestions would be the better way to do it.
Great. Thank you.
Good.
Okay. Preston's letter now skips over to Buchanan and Pierce. Is that agreeable?
That's the way the plans went.
Yeah, okay. So let's go ahead. So we've widened the curb ramps for this crossing on both the north and south side, right? To accommodate the bike path?
Correct.
Good. Strollers and rollers' concern was about ability for all directions of bicycle traffic to move through. And I think what we see here is a little better than what was shown in the plans that came to us before the meeting.
It's just drawn differently.
Maybe,
I think
yeah.
it's the same.
Is it the same? I think the concern is just to make sure there's plenty of room for a bicycle, including a bike with a trailer, to make the turn from the bike bridge that is on the west side of this complex around to the crossing of Buchanan Street. The way it's drawn here, it looks reasonably good to me. Let's see, what does the letter say? For people heading west from the intersection with Pierce and east to that intersection, it may be too narrow for the user volume, which will likely increase once the complete route from the hills to the bay is built, which will be soon.
This kind of narrow around the curve.
Yeah?
Sure.
Well, this was brought up, I think, at Park and Rec, but many cyclists actually transition onto the stub end of Buchanan there, proceeding westward.
Oh, onto Cleveland.
To
To go down to Cleveland or something?
To go down to Cleveland.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
it's
they
actually called
they actually
Cleveland
follow
there, right?
through. Actually, this,
I don't know.
what's this called?
I don't know what that's called. I don't,
Cleveland Spur, we call
Oh,
it.
okay, so the Cleveland Spur, sorry. It's a new sports team. So, and in fact, some people instead of, well, some people come up this way to engage with the light and cross this way. Some people come around this way, but this has been rather fluid, and as a user, it's been nice. If you stick landscaping there, I think that actually gets in the way. And I'm also worried about the landing area and taking it up with a lot of taking up a lot of the width. I think Preston in the Strollers and Rollers letter actually suggested things like vertical mosaics on surfaces, and Strollers and Rollers might be interested in partnering on that. I was wondering if some sort of pergola structure as a placemaking, something that would be supported at the edges and perhaps over the top. It could be functional for
Could be
sun,
more
or
the
it could
gateway into.
could be a gateway symbol. It
Yeah.
could be a shade structure. It could be just
Yeah.
a suggestion of a shade structure.
Yeah.
But something that was not on the ground and taking up that space. By leaving the space, we're leaving a lot of future flexibility. You're leaving room for bicycles to gather there, or cyclists and pedestrians to gather there, and you're leaving room potentially for that business to change over the years, and use that as a patio space.
And I'm going to say the word paint. You don't like paint on the. I mean, it is a place that kind of invites something. So I appreciated the landscape because it would warm it up, but paint on the surface is not great, correct?
Paint can be very slippery for cyclists. Can we go back to the landscape shot?
But we've had other art in the pavement treatments, like along places where the greenway crosses a creek,
Right.
where
so
we
there are other
agreed
options.
on treatments that would be
Maybe that would-
sufficiently rough surface to
So-
keep traction with the bike wheels.
Okay.
Yeah, so as I said before, this area is to me is problematic for landscaping. And I think that this was designed so that it was mountable by emergency vehicles.
That's right. Originally it was designed, but after consulting with our public safety people, they've not found that to be a necessary route for them.
Okay, great. So from a cyclist and walking user perspective, having space to turn the corner, to wait here if people are coming down in groups or in multiples from the ramp, and then to kind of organize here while you're waiting for a light, or even turn the corner, is kind of important. So, vertical elements along this area, there are already bollards here that could be decorated or added to artistically. That's the kind of thing I would look for.
Maybe some texture pavement or something like that.
I think in one of the complete streets, they had used all the fencing along the bikeway to actually
Up at the top.
show Albany, like maybe.
It would have been great. That was
Yeah.
really good, but Caltrans said that.
No.
No.
But this is an opportunity to have kind of a more welcome space to Albany, so, on this corner. So I like the idea of higher up, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll do the overcrossing another time when I have more energy.
Okay.
I have another question. So in the plans we got, it actually shows the extension of the bike lane marking westbound. Now I'm busy. It's-
Not on the
it-
presentation.
Right, so it's not in the presentation. So my question was, it's actually curved to hit the curb ramp at a right angle. But as a fast cyclist, that's not the path I would take. Because then you'd have to, immediately reverse the curve and angle up the
Get up
the ramp. So, and in fact, if I was a fast cyclist, I'm sorry, I can't point to this, but it's curved straight, and then it angles to the right and gets closer to the crosswalk, and then it hits at that point, it hits the curb ramp. If I was a cyclist coming there, I would probably want to take the straightest route between the lane I had been using up to the signal and then onto the plaza. And that would allow me to do the least turning to get to the ramp, assuming that there weren't other users on the ramp, in which case I would have to slow down, and then it's a different picture. But all things being clear, and the reason I bring this up is because if it gets marked as projected here, cars who were coming off the hill, off Pierce Street, would presumably feel comfortable if they didn't see pedestrians to advance over the crosswalk, looking left, and then perhaps advance up to that bike lane, even if they saw cyclists, and I would want to cut through them. So I see conflict there.
You're suggesting straight line then? A straight, not curve, or what?
I don't have an exact answer. I'm just trying to explain how, can we go back to the, not on this one. Oh, I'm sorry, you got it right. Yeah, okay. Let me bring my pointer back here. Right, so coming down here as an on-street fast cyclist, I'm going to start, as soon as I get to about here, I'm going to start taking a straight line to get on that ramp, because the straighter my line, the easier it is for me to gain speed and get up the ramp. Sorry?
You're saying straight.
I'm saying straight line, but I'm also wondering, are you leaving room here for a right turn on the other side, or is that parking, or?
No, the right turn should encroach into the.
So it's a shared area, right? Yeah, so yes, the answer is straight line. Thank you.
Okay, are we done with Pierce? So the next strollers and rollers comment is at Taylor. There was concern about the north side bulb out gutter pan being kept out of the westbound cycling lane. And Preston wasn't sure from looking at the plans if you had already taken care of that, but we just wanted to bring it up as a concern.
Yeah, it's been taken care of.
Okay, so the gutter pan is outside the cycling lane?
Correct.
Okay, great. And then on the south side with the bulb out, the southeastern curb ramp there is part of a bike facility and should be sized at the full width of the bike path rather than narrowed down the way it is here.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Yeah, this is a matter of some concern because several of these curb ramps have been built at the pedestrian accommodating width along this bike facility already, and we're having to consider the problem of tearing them down and rebuilding them to bike path width, and so it's especially
We've heard about it before.
yeah, we've encountered this problem before where it actually got built at the wrong width, so we're especially concerned to make sure that the plans show clearly the correct width for the bike facility here.
Right, it should be 10 feet or whatever the width of or 8 feet, whatever the width of the.
Yeah,
bike.
so we'll fix it to
Great.
show it to the same.
Thanks.
Mhm.
That is the end of the strollers and rollers.
I think Taylor
Requests.
has a bus stop near side of an uncontrolled intersection. Is that correct?
Oh, no.
Let's see. That's just a couple blocks back from Pierce. I think there is a near side stop there.
Really? I don't see a sign.
Is there?
I think
Is
it's
there a
on
bus stop?
Polk? Is it on Polk?
Oh, is it Polk? It might be Polk, okay.
I don't see it at Taylor.
There's a blue.
Maybe it's Polk.
Where our blue dot is. I think that's where the bus
Yeah,
stop
that's
is.
it. There it
Polk.
Yep, sorry. Never mind. Well, yeah, if that's, yeah, if that's possible in the scope of this project. Yes, it'd be at Polk.
That would be part of this project, no? Or,
Yeah. You know, bus stop relocations are essentially free, right? There's no cost. But there's a lot of, could be a lot of political, yeah, there could be, yeah.
There's no infrastructure
No.
installation cost, is what you're
But you could, I mean, you know, the city's gonna have to do their notifications, people are gonna complain, and you have to go through that whole process, so there's cost that way. But in terms of direct infrastructure, there's no cost.
what stops there? Is that a Transbay?
Trans Bay, right? It's like the last,
Is that G or something? No,
I think it's, is it?
I need to
There's
figure
a
it
local bus that comes across.
I've actually got something more on the Buchanan Taylor.
But yeah, I think just Polk going far side on the bus stop. Going westbound.
So I like that the hawk signal is on the south side is fully clear of the crosswalk. That's great. It looks like it's actually in the bike lane, but I'm sure you're going to work that out. And in the plans we got, there was no east-west curb cut on the northwest corner, but it looks like you got that there. You don't have to move the telephone pole, do you?
No, we'll make sure the hawk signal's out of the way of that.
Okay, cool. Great. You brought up the gutter pan?
I did.
Great.
Are we ready to
Tackle Washington.
to bite the Washington?
If I could make one correction to something I said, I went back to look at the Complete Streets report from a few years ago, and back to the San Pablo segment between Marin and Buchanan right here. The proposal was not to take out parking; it was just to narrow the travel lanes. So I just wanted to
Okay.
correct myself on that.
Actually, we haven't done the Buchanan extension. Pocket Park, have we?
We haven't talked about it because Strollers and Rollers didn't comment on it.
Well,
But if
that's
you want to
nice.
comment on it, you
I
should.
would like to comment on it.
Yes.
Is there a particular slide you'd like to look at?
I'm sorry?
Is there a particular slide or?
I don't remember your slides. Probably the first one, which is
That one.
different than what we have. But this is great. It's really hard to get from the corner off of the triangle here now, so it's fabulous.
Yeah.
And I was curious about, at the extreme bottom of the screen, there's the little tip of curb that comes off the median. And I was wondering what shape that was going to be, and why the median ended in that long nose.
Yeah, so we extended the median out past that part so that someone at the stop sign there couldn't cut across the street.
Understood.
That's the reason why we extended it out that far.
So it enables it to come out farther and not block people turning left.
Correct.
Great. Okay. Thank you. How much parking is eliminated by putting in this park?
Don't know an exact number. I think it's like 5 to 6 stalls.
Okay. So is there parking along the curve up to the stop sign westbound?
Here.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be any parking on that portion.
Okay.
So the parking would start back here somewhere. It would remain.
One of the reasons I'm asking is because if Adams becomes a two-way bikeway, this would be a way to get over to Jackson and continue south. So, and that's fine on Buchanan because there's a bike lane there, so that works. Obviously, you'd want to take Jackson instead if you were going north, but So there's something that concerns me that's off of this slide, and I don't think you had a slide that showed it well, but that there are rapid flashing beacons noted around the fire station. And that's actually already the location of the speed indicator westbound. And I've actually would like to advocate for moving the speed indicator from the center median to the north side of the street, to remove it from the foliage of the landscaping, and then to separate it from the rapid flashing beacons so that they're separate visual events. And on a more positive note, I understand that Park and Rec is going to give a lot of input to the park. One thing that we lack in Albany currently and may not be able to replicate is a good place to have service organization signs. This is actually a highly visible location that could support that, even with the plans that have been envisioned. You just basically need a couple of poles and some way to support signs, and I know of at least a couple of service organizations that would like to contribute signs to such a structure, which we currently don't have in Albany.
Do you think this location is still, or do we go back to the corner of our previous?
We don't own the corner of.
That's where
of
it
the previous-
was, wasn't it?
It was at the corner of San Pablo and the Buchanan extension.
Buchanan, yeah.
Yeah.
And sure, that would be nice, but lacking control over that, couldn't this be a place to put those?
Could be, I guess.
We'll pass that on to the landscape design.
That's all I had on that.
I just wanted to say that looks extremely cool, and I can't wait to see a more fleshed out version of it. But
Can I ask about the dollars available? Are we done with specific location by
We're gonna
location?
move
we have to do the Washington.
Oh, forgot about Washington. Yes, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
We'll put a placeholder in general stuff, right?
Save the hardest one for last.
Because I have one too.
So there is some strollers and rollers commentary here, but I think we should probably resolve the bike flow first and then consider which of the strollers and rollers comments are still germane. I remember that the consultant said they were most pleased with option 3, and to my eyes, it looks like option 3 has almost exactly the same design as we now see mostly constructed, with the exception of the non-functioning hawk signal in front of Sprouts and
Similar.
the senior housing. So it's a design that is sort of familiar to us now.
And might be familiar to users and therefore more comprehensible.
Yeah. On the other hand, it's more complex because of the driveways.
Can you explain the design again on the east side of the street? So the bike's gonna come.
In option 1,
Yeah, option 1. So bike's gonna come westbound on Washington, and then on the corner
Yeah, they turn, it's a buffered bike lane at
for bike lane. Okay.
roadway grade. There's a ramp up onto the sidewalk.
Yeah.
You travel along the wide sidewalk and then proceed to a curb ramp with the bulb out
But
to Washington West.
but no designation of a bike lane on the sidewalk, because that's probably the difference between here and Monroe is that.
I was comparing option 3
Oh, okay.
to
Okay, but okay. So in option 1 though, you're
yeah.
Right, and this
That's
would
awkward.
be a very special case
Yeah,
of
okay.
shared sidewalk, bikeway, slow zone, paint or thermoplastic stripe the heck out of
Yeah.
it.
I actually saw a design like that in Tucson last
Really?
year. In downtown Tucson, there was a place where the bike lane ran out of space on the street and it went up onto the sidewalk. It was actually painted on the sidewalk, painted as a bike lane, but you could walk in it if you chose
Yeah.
to. It was the same level as the sidewalk.
Right.
Kind of a European approach
Yeah,
where they.
Germany had
right.
Yeah.
Hamburg,
Yeah,
I
the
think.
bike is always at the same level as the sidewalk.
But in Europe, all there is like a tiny little stripe. It doesn't even show as a bike lane. It just shows as kind of a rough
Exactly.
patch of
so when-
stripe. And if you don't know what it means, you would just walk there.
You get yelled at,
Yeah.
is what happens.
Yeah.
German.
In German. Yes.
Yeah.
You learn pretty fast, though.
So in this option, would you consider painting something on the sidewalk to show that the western edge of the sidewalk is intended for bike travel?
Yeah,
Just for northbound bike travel, though. Yeah.
a lot of striping to indicate that it's a special zone,
Yeah.
especially if we maintain the parking and manage it as primarily a loading zone. With people opening doors, getting in and out of cars, there just needs to be a lot of messaging.
Conflicts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Can we see option 2 again?
I think you mentioned that the option 2 precludes the left turn from San Pablo onto Washington.
I actually didn't, but thank you for reminding me.
So that restricts auto traffic flow.
Yes, the vehicular impact related to this concept is pretty substantial because you would eliminate the entirety of the center left turn lanes. So to make a left turn heading southbound onto Washington East, you'd probably need to proceed to the very next block because the bikeway would be obstructing that. Same thing for going northbound to make the left turn onto Washington West.
Yeah.
And then any sort of turns in and out of the driveways could only be made on the same side street. There would be no cross traffic to make left turns into these facilities.
Okay. Well, I guess I'd like to look at option 3 and see if it's something that we can all get behind, because it seems like both 1 and 2 have certain problems, and the consultants already expressed a preference for option 3, and option 3 is something that's familiar to us from the system that's been built farther south. So what are the downsides of option 3 that we should be aware of before we settle to support it?
Yeah. So parking impacts primarily limited to one side of the street where they're not super high volume in the way of turnover for parking. But it does cross this gas station driveway, which could be somewhat high volume here. So, and it's also wide. It's a conflict zone. And it's a two-way facility that we're going to be bringing in front of this driveway. So it's something to be aware of. Cost is out there as well. We are proposing to have a hybrid beacon to facilitate this crossing, but also the reconstruction of essentially the entirety of the sidewalk and pushing outward into the street, the entirety of the gutter pan. It's a lot more work compared to the other options. At least the first option had fewer curb and sidewalk impacts in a relative sense. Option 2, I can't necessarily speak to cost because I'm not exactly sure about the method on how to construct the curb or whether the whole thing would be raised. I also have some doubts about option 2 being consistent with Caltrans guidance for separating bicycle facilities from highway facilities, which technically San Pablo is. So I'm not exactly sure about that one, but we drew it up anyway just to see what kind of ideas would stick. But for this one, it's the driveway crossings and its cost, I think. The amount of conflicts that you're getting compared to the first and the second one, they're comparable. I'd argue that it's some of the fewest because you're limited to one crossing of the street over on this side, and it would be facilitated with the beacon.
And that crossing would be a hawk signal or a rectangular flashing beacon?
We're recommending hawk signal.
Hawk, good. So,
Because we don't have a refuge island. It would, unless you're willing to ban the left turns, you couldn't provide one on this side of the street, on the north side of the street. It would be possible on the south side of the street. But because it's so wide.
now, when there's a hawk signal at the same place as a vehicle intersection, there is a red light that prevents San Pablo traffic from moving, but the Washington traffic theoretically can use that opportunity to scoot out and make their left turns onto San Pablo during that phase.
Yeah, that's technically true. I've been going back and forth with Caltrans because we proposed hybrid beacons at other intersections. Their guidance in the manual of uniform traffic control devices says that they're not generally supposed to be at intersections, but if they are, my conversations with them have indicated that they're kind of okay with side street vehicles using that gap that's afforded to them. I don't think it's exactly codified, but it's just kind of the way it works, and it doesn't present a huge safety issue per se, because there is signal indication through the pedestrian signal. So I think that's still under evaluation, under some evolution for that kind of signal treatment.
I guess my preference, having seen all of these, would be to advocate for option 3 with a fallback to option 1 if cost or other factors make it infeasible.
And then the parking impact here would be the 4 parking spaces. It looks like there's 4.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'll be
3 or
lost.
4 depending on whether or not they're parked in their own driveway.
Sure. So you wouldn't have to change the lane widths at all along.
No impact to the lane widths. I know we discussed with staff that we could increase the size of the buffer if the lane widths were narrowed. That's something, it's a design detail, I think, to be brought up with Caltrans, but it would not be affecting the core proposal of what we have here.
Lanes right now. We
12.
can, our suggestion
11.
was to do
Yeah.
10, 11,
Mm-hmm. Right, you can do 11 on that.
and then increase the shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I like option 3 out of the 3 options.
So what impact do any of these designs have on another project that I really can't talk that much about, but, you know, the traffic going onto Washington in both directions, basically? I could say it that
Well,
way.
the traffic calming on Albany Hill?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems like options 1 and 2 don't affect automobile flow at all.
Yeah, they do.
2 does.
Sorry,
Good.
options one and 3
Yeah.
don't affect automobile flow at all. And option 2 is a complete change of circumstance. I mean, it seems to me that option 2 is not going to be feasible, and we shouldn't really consider it further. Does that mesh with other people's observations?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, it's just such a draconian set of driving restrictions. I think for the northbound traffic, having to go a little farther and make a U-turn maybe is something they could live with, but the southbound traffic going to Solano,
Right.
to that extremely congested intersection to make a U-turn so that they can get onto Washington feels onerous.
Okay.
So I can't imagine that would be accepted.
I'm leaning towards option 3 as well. I'm also curious in general about these options in light of the future of bus rapid transit. So maybe we can call on Robert to speak to that a little bit.
That was going to be part of my larger comments is, so ACTC, Alameda County Transportation Commission, they're in the early stages of a study. I think they just selected a consultant to look at. I think they're calling it more San Pablo Complete Streets, but there is going to be an emphasis on transit, and so there's a rapid bus service already on this corridor, but it's old. It's from 2003, and so there's a lot more ITS improvements and also hardscape improvements that you can do to improve the bus service. And I think ideally they'd want to start from a blank canvas, but I think that's very challenging given that you're dealing with how many cities? What is it, like 9 cities probably, all the way up to Richmond. But I think timing for that, you're pretty far off from, I think, any type of project getting into the ground. I mean, BRT for other corridors took, for San Francisco, it took 20 years. It took 17 years for AC Transit.
Yeah.
2040 is what I've heard.
Well, do they use a center lanes model, and
They don't have a.
there's no set plan?
They don't have a.
Just starting
program.
the study at this
Yeah.
point. We're going to have a meeting this month, I think.
So we can't make any assumptions about
No.
how that might look and
Yeah.
how it
Actually,
might
they
affect
do
these
have
things.
the plans these plans. I already submitted,
submitted
these
them?
plans to,
Okay, that's good.
their consultant, Kimley Horn.
Yeah, yeah. The general program they want is they actually want bike lanes and bus lanes, and then maybe a single lane of traffic, and then maybe do something with the median to accommodate all of that. It's going to be hard, but that's the ideal scenario would be single lane of travel, a single lane of general purpose, bus lane and bike lane.
Okay.
Wow. Okay,
It's a very different look from what we have today.
yeah,
Yes, a little different.
yeah.
But it's really difficult to want to say that you're going to pause a project for a project that may not be implemented for 15
I'm just
years.
thinking about the relative likelihood that any one piece of what we're looking at might be in the way of that, or get bulldozed by that in the future. Sounds like we can't make those assumptions.
Yeah, it's difficult to say.
Okay.
This is the main intersection that my daughter walks every day
Yeah.
to school. I won't let her cross anywhere that doesn't have at least a light. This light's so fast too. She talks a lot about that. But I think out of the three, this one makes more sense. It's also spending time in the shops across the street to think about the bikes. It is a wide sidewalk, but it would be odd. So this one
Okay.
seems
So-
interesting, though. If it's really expensive, I don't know.
So that's another.
I have information about the cost of this cycle track. Just construction is about $800,000 for these routes. Just construction. No contingency, no project management.
This is based on what we did at Monroe? Is that where you're, okay.
And remind me why it's important to be here, the cycle
From the comment.
crossing in this area. Can someone give me the history of that?
I can take a stab at it.
Would you?
It's a prioritized bikeway, and part of that is because unless you would engage with the traffic at Solano, there's no good east-west crossing. Currently, there isn't one at Marin Buchanan. It's not ideal. The bike lanes don't connect, and we're looking for a phase 4 to make that more bike amenable. But it's a long distance, even from Buchanan up to Washington and beyond. As we've looked at, many of the streets to the north are T intersections and not full crossings, which would mean you'd have to bike on. In fact, they're all T
Right.
intersections.
Yeah, I think they are.
I mean, these
So-
are technically two, but the distance between them is a lot shorter.
Right. So
Shorter.
this is an opportunity,
To get
our
across.
best opportunity to make a good east-west crossing for people who live on the hill and people who live to the east to connect across.
Yep.
Also, Washington Avenue is a bicycle boulevard on both sides of San Pablo Avenue.
I think Ken is explaining why we chose Washington
No,
Avenue.
no, no, let's be explicit. Yes, it's a bicycle boulevard.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Thank you.
So, Robert, did you want to express a preference for one of the three options?
I already did, but yeah, 3. would
Three,
be the
okay.
preference.
So I think we unanimously prefer option 3. Do you also agree with my general sense that if it proves impossible, option 1 is the better of the first 2?
Can we look at option 1 and 2 again, just to make sure I understand? So there's one.
Option 1 is the one with the shared sidewalk.
Right.
Right.
Option 2 is the center
Center running.
So you were saying the backup was
1.
One.
one. I mean, I think option 2 looks lovely, but I don't believe that it would ever get built, so.
Yeah, one with the as the backup with some detail about what that eastern sidewalk is going to look like. That's sounds like it's going to be a challenge.
Well, while we're here at option 1, I just want to point out that option 1 also removes all of the parking in the same distance on the west side.
That's right. And then at least
Option 3
4
retains.
spaces on the other east side as well.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no bus issue in this area, is there?
I didn't see one. I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no stops here. As long as the lane widths stay the same, then there's no challenge.
Okay, there is a little bit of strollers and rollers commentary, which I'll now try to adapt to option 3. Okay, so for the San Pablo and western leg of Washington, which is on the left side of this picture, strollers and rollers requests that the crosswalk be moved to the north leg where the median is located. Is there a median there?
There was in one of the options, I think.
Showing one there.
Yeah.
You showed one there, but is that part of the original plan, or was that added for option 1?
Joe, I don't know, maybe you could help me out. Is there a median planned north of Washington?
I think there is, isn't it? No? North?
Just directly north of Washington?
Directly north of Washington. No median?
I might be able to find it.
Yes.
Looks like it could be, yes.
So that's a case where one of the crosswalk options uses the median and the other one doesn't, but the plans currently show it in the place with no median. Is there a reason, would it be possible to move the crosswalk onto the north side where the median is?
Is there a
You could
driveway
take a
there?
look at that.
So,
And that may also
Yeah, there is.
clear
There's a
some,
driveway
right,
on-
you're
oh,
right.
is there a driveway?
On the
East
west
side?
side.
On the east side?
Not on the east side, on the west side.
Oh, yeah.
Lost it. Let me check that.
Not on the west side, because that's the,
Yeah, there's actually a driveway. Oh, but no, not there. Okay. So there is not a driveway on the west side, but I thought there might be a driveway on the east side. I'm sorry, I
Yes.
got turned around.
yes.
But I think that's well clear. So there's a driveway, there are 3 businesses in one building in the intersection on the east side, and there's a driveway at the north of that building.
So could the
See where that what?
crosswalk be placed to
The
the
white
north?
truck is.
The white truck.
Behind, in the bottom left image, the white truck, the cab is parked blocking the view of that particular driveway.
So could a crosswalk be placed to the north of where that white truck is? Immediately to the north of it?
Would we remove the tree or still
This
farther north of there?
and this.
Well, it has to, the crosswalk has to be controlled by the traffic light,
Yeah,
so it can't be moved too far.
yeah.
It looks like there might be room on street view. I'm on the satellite view on Google Maps
Well,
To miss that driveway.
and the stoplight post.
Okay.
Yeah, looks like Right here?
Yeah, there.
And just because I don't remember why they're requesting that movement?
Because that's where the median is.
To get a
Oh,
refuge.
just for the median,
Yeah.
okay.
And it also, regardless of which option, it reduces conflicts with, well, at least in option 3, it reduces conflicts with the turning bicycles in that complex
That's
corner.
true.
In the southwest corner where right now the bulb out that's shown looks like it creates a challenge for option 3.
Right, right.
So if the crossing was on the north side, then the crossing is completely independent of the system of
Yeah,
bike paths.
that seems
bike
better.
routes.
There's one trade-off I'll just highlight, which
Okay.
is the left-turning cars from Washington will be conflicting with that relocated crosswalk.
Yeah,
So it's a trade-off.
a
I
trade-off.
acknowledge that it would calm down this high-traffic corner where the bikeway would
Yeah.
intersect, though, so.
I think the advantage of the median is strong enough.
So the left turning lane would be in conflict with,
The left-turning
With-
vehicles would be
Yeah.
conflicting
Would be moving,
pedestrians making this
it's
movement.
the same high-speed
Yeah.
conflict that I complained about
Asking
at
for the
Brighton.
opposite thing, yeah.
Yeah,
We'll add
Yes,
safety.
yes.
We do have the same at Clay, I think. The same situation where the crosswalk is on the north side, and the left-turning vehicles on Clay, they have to yield to the pedestrians. I think it's Clay, isn't it? Clay, or Castro, I don't remember.
I don't remember.
It's the one. But it's by the Meow veterinary, the dog.
Clay.
Okay.
Yeah, Clay.
Anyway.
No.
Um,
Well, that's not where the pet hospital is, but yeah. But it is Clay Street.
And regardless of where that crosswalk ends up, Strollers and Rollers requests bulb outs for it, which I think you're showing in this diagram here. So if the crosswalk is moved, then the bulb outs should be moved too.
Should have made a little sign.
Um,
about
Okay.
I don't remember if I sent you this comment, but somebody sent me an email before, way before this meeting, that the traffic signal at Clay, I think, is hard to see from far away, and I think that's intentional by Caltrans.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're wondering if it can be changed to a regular ball, ball.
Instead of a directional.
Right, it's like a refraction.
Yeah, yeah. It's a directional refraction.
Refraction or
So
refraction.
that you can't see it until you're past the previous stoplight.
Yeah, until you're
Yeah, yeah.
almost at that. I think it's because of the proximity to each other that they have that mechanism.
Yeah.
It's clear.
Yeah, it's Clay. And it's specifically southbound Clay.
Okay. There was one more Strollers and Rollers comment at Washington. And that, I promise this will be the last from Preston.
Ooh, I got a
on
text.
San Pablo and the eastern leg of Washington, which is on the right side of this picture, there is not a median proposed going to the south from this point. Do you know the reason for that? So from where basically that would provide a refuge for the crosswalk that you have drawn in here.
That's because of the scope, the limits of the project.
Oh,
I would also argue that that area gets used for deliveries in the median.
vehicles are like stopping in the median, in
Is
the,
it? I mean, I think the one that is used for deliveries is the one south of the intersection of Solano, between Solano and Buchanan.
More, yeah.
yeah.
I think
Well-
I've seen them there.
It's also an area where emergency vehicles will sometimes cross over to go onto opposite direction of traffic in order to get around
Solano or something.
congestion.
Okay,
It's out
well,
of the scope.
Well, moving the north crosswalk, we'll get one, would help us.
yeah, and also I
That
think if we do option 3, there would be a hawk signal here, and the refuge would be less important, so.
Right, and the signal would be coordinated, or the hawk signal would be coordinated with the other local
With-
signals,
with
which
the-
hopefully would also help calm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
crossing.
Oh, yeah, if there's a hawk.
okay. All right, I
This
think,
is like the Wild West, that hairy,
No pun intended.
no.
I resemble that remark.
No, you don't.
All right.
Okay, what
So
else?
those are your,
So we're back to general comments?
back to general comments, overall.
So, we brought up lighting before, and I would love to see lighting addressed at the crossings wherever possible. It's particularly dark at Garfield. Also, we're making a lot of assumptions about where people cross, and I think many of them are good assumptions. But I would love to see wayfinding to help people find best crossings, both by bike and on foot. I think that could really help make this work.
I think, build it, they will come. Like, we don't know how much more foot traffic there would be if it felt
Right, but if you had
safer
signs
and,
that-
and bicycle.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
We don't know how much they would respond. But if you were traveling by foot on the west side of San Pablo, and there was a sign there that said, this crossing in Portland is a good way to get to the pool and Memorial Park.
It's a good point. Like it.
So, just while I'm talking, I think the one thing that I have that's out of the scope is at Solano and San Pablo, on the northeast corner, the walk and wait, or whatever you call it now, signal head facing west is significantly offset from the stoplight at the same location. To the extent that we have had, I believe on 2 occasions, people come to traffic and safety and tell us there is no walkhead at that location.
So what is it, like 10 feet apart or something like that?
It's not 10 feet, but it's just offset enough.
So this is if you're standing
If
on
you're standing on the northwest corner looking
trying to
east,
cross to the
trying to
east.
cross, and that's particularly a problem because if you only watch the signal head, cars get the green light to turn left before you get the green light to cross eastbound.
Yeah.
So people have said that they were surprised by traffic because they did not see the walkhead.
My impression is that it is related to the fact that there is the split, the protected left turn, and when the protected left turn is on, it's green for the eastbound vehicles turning northbound onto San Pablo. You don't have the pedestrian signal.
Right.
And then I've seen people crossing on the left turn lane
Right.
when the left turn lane is on.
But some of those people might have just not realized that there was a don't walk sign facing them because they couldn't see it.
That's what I believe, because we've actually had people come and tell us there isn't one.
It actually looks like it's more than 10 feet apart. So the question is, can you put it on the same,
Can they be brought together?
right, can you put it on the same mast arm as a signal?
Oh, we're going to ask Caltrans.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was,
So we have a number.
Project, sorry.
Yeah, we have a number of small requests and not so small, like the bike lane, that are on the section of San Pablo between Marin and Marin Extension, Marin and this and the southern edge of that Washington intersection. So I just want to make sure we don't lose the opportunity to advocate for those improvements at the right time. And I can understand if tonight is not the right time, but should we actually consider making a separate project to do?
I think that's what would, with a separate agenda item, talk about
Yeah.
that segment of roadway. Again, this was the start as a focus of getting people across, pedestrians across San Pablo,
Yeah.
and thinking more about kind of whether it's bicycles or pedestrians in this other segment, different set of issues that we would be happy to take on. We'll have to figure out money for it, but take on in 2018 or 2019
Okay,
or whenever we
great.
can.
Did you have more general?
Matter of
did
putting it
you-
on the CIP project, CIP list.
Yeah, I did have questions on the funding. So you mentioned there's 400,000, and that's for capital as well as construction and design. Is that design?
Just construction.
Just construction.
We applied for a OBAG too,
Uh-huh.
and we just gave our, Alameda County just gave our share of our local assistance roads money through the federal program. That is basically 340,000. And I'm negotiating a leftover 75,000 from the Buchanan Bikeway 1 and 2, CMAQ funding to transfer into this project, construction of this, at 77,400. So that plus is basically a little bit over 400,000.
So design is funded separately for this. Okay.
It's through an ATP grant, state grant. It doesn't have federal dollars, thank God.
So I don't know if you guys have done any preliminary estimate at 35%, but I think we have a lot more than $400,000 worth of improvements here.
It's about 3.5, isn't it, $1 million?
Yeah, 3.5.
Okay.
Wow.
So how do we go about spending the 400K? Are we going to prioritize somehow, or?
I think either we do San Pablo first, Buchanan later, or basically by intersections. I think that's the way to do it. That's what I said at the beginning. We're going at 65%. We should prioritize how this is going to be implemented.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Okay,
should
so-
really, at least 65, and you also need to take into consideration some of the other things you may want to do. So the capital improvement program budget is really the place to kind of strategize about how you want to spend money.
Meaning that the 400K may not necessarily be just used solely on this project, or you?
Well, it is in the Alameda County expenditure plan, it is assigned to this project.
Assigned to this project, okay. So then you'd have to go for some sort of action to make that different. Okay, so we have $400,000 that we know are committed to this project. And then the rest of the 3.1 million is unfunded at this point. Okay,
So at the 65% plan, we'll
Wanna have a
also
better-
kind of have an idea of how much each treatment costs so that we can,
Better idea of how much it will cost.
okay.
yeah. I mean, it's not going to get us a whole lot.
No,
Couple
well-
intersections, I guess, something like that.
But this is something you could put out for grants or no?
So,
Okay.
and that's one thing I did want to mention. So, I think it was Portland. No, was it, or the other side of the street? Was it Castro, where the bus stop wanted to go far side? I think Harry and Strollers and Rollers were thinking putting a bulb there. Then that's a great safe routes to transit, or even safe routes to school type of grant opportunities. I think all of these are
Yeah.
qualify for both.
Oh, yeah.
So that's our big opportunity.
You can start writing strong letters of recommendation.
Yeah,
That would be cool.
yeah.
Let me follow up on something we heard from the public about Brighton, where the main improvement being suggested is a lead-off phase. Is the signal that's already in place there capable of a pedestrian lead-off?
Yeah.
So is that something we could do even before building this project?
I think so. During the peer review, we can actually explore those opportunities that can be done,
Then
those improvements that can be done without any kind of grant or that Caltrans can help us with.
It's my understanding too, from talking with Caltrans, that they're actually retiming good chunk of San Pablo Avenue
Okay.
prior to the project. So
Yeah.
They will be open to our changes here,
correct, yeah.
so they said.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot that can be done with, outside of a grant application, but bulb outs and, or we can just take this, for instance, now that I'm saying that, I'm suggesting this two, like staggered intersection, but this could be a project, just
Sure.
this.
Sure. I think we're going to have to look at it that way. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, staff will figure it out.
sure. Okay. Okay. Wow. All right. So we've received presentation and we've provided feedback.
I don't know, have we provided enough feedback?
I don't know.
With barely any public comment.
And we were going to try to do this all
Right.
in one night?
It's one item, yeah.
Wow.
We still have time.
I know, seriously. Anything more on this? Okay. All right. We will move on to, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way,
Thank
very,
you.
very, very
job.
much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to announcements and communication. I think 6-1 is Ken's? Oh, no, sorry. Traffic and Safety Commission member representation on interview panel for the consultant selection for Solano Avenue complete. Ooh.
So,
Oh, yes.
It's fine, yeah. It's early. It's early.
Public meetings.
Public record.
There's that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
I'm sure it's not the first time they've gotten that.
well, so we do have the Solano Avenue Complete Streets Conceptual Design and Public Outreach project. It's, the RFP was out last week, I think, and, or a couple of weeks ago. And they're due December 1st. And we're anticipating interviews, I think the second week of December, if I remember correctly. So we're requesting one of you to be on a panel, interview panel, and help us select a consultant.
I wouldn't mind if people are looking for someone. The commission's looking to represent, have someone represent us. I wouldn't mind.
We'll try to keep it to a half day.
Even better.
It's an interesting process.
Yeah, it seems
Yeah.
like a cool project, so.
Is that,
It's fine with
is that
me.
Do we
fine?
need to nominate, or can we just,
Yeah, you can nominate and recommend one.
Okay.
I nominate Robert.
I second.
Great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No? We,
Looking forward to it.
That's great, and if for some reason it doesn't work out with Robert, can we just check in with
Oh, that's a good
the chair
point to do, yes.
to
Reassign.
work something out?
sure,
Right.
of course.
Yeah.
I hear Opticos is thinking of applying.
Oh, great.
They're thinking about it. It's a small project for them.
That's a good firm.
So 6-2, update on the Gilman I-80 interchange.
I think I'll go to the podium to get my computer hooked in.
Oh, okay, you
'cause
have
it wasn't
something?
working here. I just have a couple slides.
Okay.
Is that it? No.
Oh, I was going to show, go ahead.
I've got some others, yeah. So I think I pressed the button next to the board I'm using. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just keep pushing buttons till something happens.
Yeah. There's more space. That's nice. Great. Thank you. Right. So this is mostly me as a representative of Albany Strollers and Rollers. About a year and a half ago, I think, the Albany Strollers and Rollers wrote a letter to the I-80 Gilman project team, and only recently was that really responded to. And what we were saying was that we had some questions about their active transportation. No, sorry. There we go. Their active transportation solutions, which you can see here. Basically, their initial proposal was to have all cyclists who wanted to be off the roadway to come down Gilman, at some point get on a cycle track, cross over Gilman, and then get on, and then cross the frontage road and go over the freeway in what is not a short overpass. Strollers and Rollers' goal was really to make this a more accessible option. We're worried about people trying to get down Gilman or back up it. We're worried about crossing Gilman. And we want to make this as accessible to all ranges of cyclists and walkers as much as possible. So there's been an ongoing discussion and some meetings. Some options were looked at, including, and I should mention, in our ATP is actually a desire to have a crossing of the freeway at the Cotternesis Creek corridor. And so one of our suggestions was, could there be a way to have a northern crossing that might connect to the Cotternesis Creek area? Might look something like this. Turns out there are a lot of issues with making that work, and including construction in a wetland, getting that much land from the Golden Gate Fields property owner. It's looking now like there might be a compromise to have a northern U that would also take some land from Golden Gate Fields that hopefully would touch down without a further crossing of the frontage road or Gilman over at the fields. Really, this is there are a lot of details. I won't go into them all, but the idea is to create a desirable enough crossing that avoids enough road crossings that it will be attractive to go that far out of the way to get over the freeway. I think.
So that proposal wouldn't connect to the Cotternesis Creek potential crossing, right?
That is correct, but there would be the potential to connect from that corridor in some fashion in the future.
Okay.
So
With that,
the western touchdown of that looks here like it's to the north of Gilman Street.
that's
but
correct. That in this particular view, I have some of the current information and not all of it.
But the goal is to have one terminus of this be at the south of Gilman Street, west of the freeway, right at the ball fields.
At the ball fields, adjacent to, without any further crossings,
Right.
the Bay Trail.
And then the other terminus would be on the north side of Gilman, east of the freeway.
On the
Somewhere.
north side of Gilman, east of the freeway,
Somewhere in that
it would
complex.
still require crossing the frontage road. And I should say, just because it's important, Albany as a city is concerned about vehicular traffic in this corridor leading up to the Target area, because that's one of our main sales tax drivers and one of our businesses. So that there are issues with having the touchdown here and maintaining traffic flow through this area. So with that, I'll turn it over to staff who've been to a more recent meeting than I.
Yes, there's Leda and I have been attending a series of meetings, and they will be continuing over the next few weeks. We are tentatively anticipate that the Alameda County Transportation Commission staff will be attending the December 4th city council meeting to make a presentation on this. And that timing and the city council is important because there is a possibility of some discussion of this project. I'm not clear exactly what it would be yet, but some discussion of this project at the December 7th commission meeting, Alameda County Transportation Commission meeting.
It's a funding-related discussion.
We want to have community input on the items that Ken mentioned, as well as the vehicle access, well, vehicle and bicycle access issues that might be impacted by the traffic circles at Gilman. It's one of these projects that moves really slowly, and then all of a sudden a lot of things happen quickly, and then we're at that stage where I think over the next couple of weeks we're engaging now more with the commission on this in the last 3 weeks than we have in 10 years. So we're pleased with that, and we hope to be able to report back to you as a commission at some point in all this.
For the record-
December 7th meeting is because they need to have an agreement on $4 million of funding that need to, one of the requirements is to have community support of the project.
There's a possibility that the pedestrian overcrossing issue will be separated out, and the various options for pedestrian crossings will be separated out as a separate project from the surface improvements of the traffic circles, roundabouts at Gilman, because of the funding constraints on the surface improvements. And I think there's some advantage to that in that it gives time for various pedestrian crossing options to get better evaluated.
So would there be funding set aside for that separate project, or would that have to come from somewhere else?
That would be something for the commission to ask the commission representative when they're
Yeah.
here on December 4th.
Yeah. I think it's also important to understand that there's a long-term intention to actually move Gilman in an underpass under the railroad tracks.
That's right.
And two things about that I think are important are it may be hard to make that an attractive underpass for bikes and pedestrians. And it may be a psychological barrier. But it also might be an additional time point to ask for mitigation. So there's some balancing in there. I'm still a little unclear. So the project manager who brought strollers and rollers in, and we're also very appreciative of being involved and being consulted. She works for ACTC.
Yes.
Yeah.
But how is Caltrans involved, or are they?
It is a Caltrans, it's overseeing this project, actually.
Okay.
It's related to the freeway, and it's something that Caltrans has to oversee.
I had a conversation with the consultant Preston, and I happened to have an informal conversation with the commission representative. And basically what's happening in a lot of projects is implementation of Caltrans projects is being pushed down to local or regional agencies. So it's a Caltrans project, but the commission is executing and delivering it.
Okay.
And the city of Berkeley, by the way, is a major stakeholder because there's lots going on with city streets.
Yeah.
At one point, it was a city of Berkeley project, I think ages ago. So it's complicated.
Great.
Yeah.
So I would encourage people to go on December 4th and hear the presentation and give input.
And then the December 7th meeting, where is that?
That's in Oakland in the
Alameda
afternoon.
County
Okay.
Transportation Commission, you know the time?
I don't know the time.
I don't know, but we can find out the time.
And would that be a useful place for us to show up as well?
Yes.
I think the city council meeting is a good place to make initial comments to commission staff so that they can hopefully get that feedback and act on it before the commission meeting itself. Sometimes it's hard to affect change if they're hearing it for the first time, right when they're about to vote on something.
The city council meeting also is maybe more important for you to attend.
Okay. Any other questions on that? All right.
Oh, and it's okay, there's no bus stop.
6.3, update on Bay Conservation and Development Commission approval of the East Bay Regional Park District Bay Trail Beach Project.
I won't pull up the graphic. I thought I had it open, but somehow got closed. But just to quickly report in on this, I think you may be aware that the East Bay Regional Park District has an exciting project for the community in the region, which is to close the gap between Gilman and north of Buchanan for the Bay Trail. Right now, you can kind of bicycle through Golden Gate Fields, but it's not a proper Bay Trail. There now is a final approval from BCDC for the trail project and for the parking lot and a new restroom, as well as some areas for water sports to be able to set up, kiteboarders and so forth, to set up, and ecological restoration of the beach areas, and creation of some dunes. So the main thing is that project has been approved and is now kind of moving into the construction phase. I would expect that goes to construction sometime in 2018.
So it's funded and everything. Okay.
That's great, and sounds like the beach restoration can move forward. Wasn't the parking lot projected for an area that hadn't yet been negotiated for purchase?
The way the Park District is going through an eminent domain action,
Okay.
and the Park District can get possession of the property before the final court action on the value of the property. So there's a active lawsuit over the value of the property. That that case is scheduled to go to trial in January. But in the meantime, the transfer of title will occur, and may have already occurred, I don't remember, sometime relatively soon, where the Park District can move forward with the implementation of their project. So they're just arguing over money.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any other announcements? Comments?
Did we talk about future agenda items last time, or did we leave that
No.
off?
No, we did not.
It's not on our agenda, but it's a regular agenda item,
There were future agenda items on the last agenda, right?
right?
Shall I read those so that everyone has those? So, operational street impacts of the Albany Unified School District San Gabriel Campus Project, sidewalk repair program, Buchanan Park and Ride design progression, and pavement program. Any other ones to add or discuss, other than what we discussed tonight?
Well, didn't we want to have, I don't know if we want to agendize it yet, but the items that were small ones that were falling out of the project limits?
Right, the
So the Solano and
south
Buchanan.
of Washington.
Yeah.
San
But that's
Pablo.
really a separate project for you, that you guys need to pull together, right?
Yeah, I think we can provide a description and an approximate cost, JP, or shall we discuss it here first?
You know, I think it's,
Without graphics, it's going to be hard.
yeah, and without, I think maybe it's something to think about as grant application opportunities come along. That might be the place to start thinking about it. And we can certainly put it on your agenda.
But there wouldn't be a 35% design for us to look at
We don't have-
if you don't have money to pay someone to create it. So
Go after money to hire a design team like you
Yeah.
saw this evening to prepare those
Okay.
kinds of plans.
So I don't think we need to agendize discussing looking for the money for that, right? Can
Wouldn't we
agendize it
want-
once.
As long as you have the scope of what
That's
we're-
one thing I was going to suggest maybe for January, if you want to go back to the complete
Right.
streets document and just look at that segment, see what, kind of define a little bit of informally or maybe formally at scope
Yeah.
that can be used for a grant application. That's one thing that I can use, actually.
We can certainly do that. You know,
At least the strollers and rollers comments didn't significantly change what was drawn in the, I mean, they weren't asking for anything that goes way beyond what was drawn in the original plan, so it was just implementation details about it.
I'd love to put that, find a way to put that on our future work plan or, you know, as a sort of a placeholder, and then work with staff to figure out when it's appropriate to go forward with that.
So instead of placing it directly on the agenda, have it more in the future.
But have it written down somewhere. on
Right,
a
have it
list.
programmed
I guess what
somewhere.
might drive that is, you know, some more information from staff as to what grants and when they might be looking to go after them, so that we know how much we need to frame when.
I kind of like the idea of taking this at a manageable pace. And so for a planning project, I think 2018, your big planning project is going to be Solano Avenue. You know, this design process will be completed in 2018. So you've got a big project in design, a big project in planning, and then Mark and Aleda in Public Works will implement these projects.
There's a limit to,
And you have to get the money. So, you know, we can certainly talk about it, but I don't see taking on another major planning effort in 2018. I think Solano is
And
gonna
not
be-
taking on another grant funding cycle with that.
If we're having challenges spending
Do
the
the-
money we
Money now.
have,
right.
implementing projects, and we have paving projects with ATP elements in it. We have sidewalk things we want to do. We've got plenty to do right now. So my hesitation that you're sensing here is just like one more thing that.
Well,
That's fair.
yeah, I understand that, and I think that what we saw tonight are really important additions, improvements to quality of life in Albany, and so if we can prioritize that and get some of them achieved.
Do we have an update to the active transportation plan next year? Is that next year?
We
That's another thing for 2018.
So that's another opportunity for it.
Yeah.
That's an
For it to-
opportunity to
To
actually
capture it.
Yeah, to capture it.
that
Yeah.
area of San
Okay.
Pablo Avenue.
Yeah.
And integrate some of the complete streets.
Right, and also I think we will have partial funding for the extension of the cycle track from the Sprouts to the corner of San Pablo to Buchanan.
Wow.
At least we have some partial funding that I think we're going to be allocated from the EFCA fund, which is a transportation fund for clean air. Spending the development of the San Pablo Avenue at Alameda County because they don't want to fund anything that will go against their proposal. I don't think the cycle track will go against, but you know.
All right, we have 30 seconds left before we have to extend time.
I want to mention that our next meeting is our holiday meeting,
Yes.
and we usually do that as a sort of a dessert potluck.
Sounds good.
That will be fun.
Yeah.
I
Always
enjoy
bring
that.
good food, so
We do, we do.
it's free for, whatever you guys want to bring.
I adjourn the meeting for the evening. Thank you. Right on.
Congratulations. Very nice.
Good thing we didn't try to finish this all.